Overseas, the 25 million residents in China's largest city remain confined to their homes as Shanghai continues to conduct more Covid-19 tests and report more infections. It has been over 10 days since the lockdown was first imposed in the eastern areas before expanding to cover the whole city. Daily life has become more of a struggle, with residents forced to depend on city officials for food and other essential supplies. Tens of thousands of people are also being quarantined at designated isolation facilities. Earlier today, the city reported 322 new symptomatic cases and more than 19,600 asymptomatic infections. With more is our China correspondent Elizabeth Law joining me from Beijing. Elizabeth, the situation in Shanghai seems to have got worse since we last spoke to you earlier last week. At that time, the plan was to put the city under a snap two-stage lockdown for mass testings to be carried out. But now it seems that the lockdown is going on indefinitely. What's happening there?
So the thing about Shanghai is that initially, yes, the plan was, even before the two-stage lockdown, was meant to do this slice and dice method where they were going to have targeted lockdowns in various housing estates so that they could test people in small groups to minimize the sort of disruption to the city, which is, of course, the financial heart of China. That did not go well because cases kept popping up. And then there was, of course, that plan that you mentioned earlier to split the city into half and then again to mass test each half and try and weed out all the cases. But then I think midway through, they did realize that essentially the number of asymptomatic patients were just rising very, very quickly. And simply this is because the Omicron variant is just so infectious. So effectively, what has happened now is that Shanghai is under a lockdown that I think they're by now on their third round of mass testing across the entire city. And still new cases are popping up today. And as you mentioned, it is a record number that was reported today. Neighboring provinces have also made up space for temporary hospitals, but still it is very hard to see how Shanghai is going to be able to lift this lockdown in the near future, simply because the authorities are still very focused on a zero COVID policy.
And what about the people, Lisa? How are the people coping with the lockdown? What's the situation on the ground?
Right. So I'm clearly in Beijing, and but from what we're seeing on social media and from context that we know, that the situation is really getting quite frustrating. People are getting very frustrated, a little bit dire as well, because firstly, food supplies are running very, very low. It's not that there isn't enough food, it's just that food isn't getting to people, getting to places where it is necessary, or people are finding it very hard to order delivery and things like that, because there has been a lack of delivery workers, either because of quarantine, because of people getting locked down, people testing positive, or other logistics workers that they just aren't willing to go into Shanghai unless they're being paid exorbitant amounts, because they're so worried of getting the virus. Because remember, if you get positive here, it's not just about staying home and being able to do an ART test kit on yourself. Here, the moment you test positive, you get sent to a mass quarantine center where you actually may get worse, and you are not allowed to leave the place until you test negative, which could take up to 2 weeks, in fact. And then after that, there are still many other steps along the way that you have to go through, as another 2 weeks of quarantine. So essentially, testing positive for COVID here, even though a lot of people are testing asymptomatic now, is actually a very, very disruptive process. So logistics workers aren't willing to go into Shanghai to work. And the others who have been going around trying to keep the city running, well, we all know now that many of them have also succumbed to COVID.